The soft hum of Harper Jennings' laptop was the only sound accompanying her as midnight crept over Seattle. Her modest apartment, tucked above a noisy bakery in Capitol Hill, was dim except for the glow of her screen casting long shadows over blueprints and budget breakdowns. 14 hours at the office hadn't been enough to finalize the bridge project proposal her firm needed by morning, so Harper brought the work home. Again. Her fingers cramped from typing, her eyes blurry from scrolling through endless calculations, but still she pushed on. She adjusted the heating dial in her apartment, knowing it wouldn't do much. The building's ancient system wheezed more than it worked, but replacing it would have meant spending money she didn't have, because almost everything extra went to her family. Rent payments for a house she didn't live in, emergency medical bills that never came with receipts, a new laptop for her brother, tuition fees for her sister, groceries, car repairs, holiday gifts. Every dollar was a sacrifice made in love, a quiet repayment for their struggles after Dad passed. Family comes first, Harper reminded herself, the mantra as worn as her living room rug. Her phone vibrated against the table. It was a call from Lena, probably to ask for help with another last-minute crisis. Despite the exhaustion hanging from her shoulders like lead, Harper smiled and answered. But instead of her sister's voice, the call filled with the echo of laughter, clinking glasses, music, and then words that would rip her world apart. It started as a pocket dial, but within seconds it became a window into a cruel truth. Her family didn't see her as a person, or even a sister. She was a resource, a walking wallet, a safety net, an ATM with a degree. Harper didn't hang up. She sat in silence, spreadsheet open before her, while the people she loved most unknowingly revealed what they truly thought of her. And as the final joke landed, she realized that while she'd spent her life building bridges for others, her own had been quietly set on fire. Harper's fingers hovered above her keyboard when her phone buzzed again, Lena's name lighting up the screen. Expecting a quick check-in or another request for help, Harper answered with her usual warmth, her voice soft despite the exhaustion in her bones. But what met her ears wasn't Lena's voice. It was background noise, a burst of lively music, clinking glasses, and overlapping conversations. At first, Harper thought it was a butt dial, and was about to hang up when her name sliced through the static like a blade. "Can you believe Harper still thinks she's helping us?" Lena's voice, unmistakably clear, rang out with mockery. Harper froze, her breath caught in her throat, heart thudding against her ribs. Laughter followed, her mother Monica's familiar sharp cackle, and then Ryan chimed in, his voice slurred and careless. "She's basically an ATM with a degree." Each word landed like a punch to the chest, and Harper sat motionless, clutching the phone as her family continued their cruel performance, unaware of the audience on the other end. "She owes us," Monica sneered. "No husband, no kids. What else is she going to do with her money?" Ryan laughed again, echoing, "Just guilt her. She always folds, huh?" Harper's eyes blurred as she stared at the glowing spreadsheet on her screen. Rows of figures representing years of sacrifice, now unraveling into betrayal. She heard Lena suggest lying about rent going up again, Monica casually adding, "Have her cover utilities and maybe my spa days too." Harper couldn't move, couldn't speak. The voices of the people she'd bent her life to support revealed themselves as users, not loved ones. Her hand trembled as she finally ended the call, not with rage but with a slow, quiet dread. The call hadn't just been an accident. It was a revelation, one that shattered years of trust in the span of a few unguarded minutes. Harper sat alone in her cold apartment, the silence now heavier than before, the laughter still ringing in her ears. Something fundamental had shifted. For the first time, Harper saw the truth, and she would never unhear it. Harper sat frozen, the phone still in her hand, the final words of that accidental call echoing through her mind like a cruel refrain. She always folds. The phrase gnawed at her as her gaze drifted to the stack of unopened mail on her side table, and then to the spreadsheet still glowing on her laptop screen. Numbers and deadlines faded into the background as a dam of memories burst open. She thought of the Maine hiking trip she canceled 3 years ago when Ryan claimed he needed a sudden tuition top-up. The emergency dental work she put off, twice, because Lena's car broke down and she couldn't get to her law classes. The second job Harper quietly took, bartending weekend weddings, just to cover Monica's alleged hospital scans, which she paid for without question, never asking for proof. Every bonus, every raise, had been spoken for before she even saw it, snatched up by a rotating cycle of family crises that always coincided with her paydays. Harper had always chalked it up to bad luck, coincidence, sacrifice, but now, those moments rearranged themselves in her mind under a harsh new light, each request deliberate, each expression of gratitude a mask. Her eyes welled with tears, but she didn't cry. Instead, she stood slowly and retrieved a box of financial documents from the hallway closet. The one she hadn't opened in years because she was too busy working, too trusting, too tired. She pulled out folders, receipts, bank statements, years of evidence that, when laid side by side, told a story far different from the one she'd been told. One of manipulation, of misuse, of betrayal dressed as need. Her heart ached, not just from the financial losses, but from the realization that her love had been transactional to them. She wasn't a daughter or a sister, she was a resource, a utility, a fallback plan. Sitting on her living room floor, surrounded by paperwork and memories, Harper finally saw what she had been unwilling to admit. She had been alone in this relationship for a long time. The warmth she once clung to had been a performance, and she had unknowingly financed the whole show. As dawn painted streaks of gray across Seattle's sky, Harper sat at her dining table, no longer haunted by confusion, but guided by a quiet, simmering purpose. The spreadsheet she opened this time wasn't for her bridge project or her firm's finances. It was titled Exit Strategy, bold and centered at the top of the screen like a mission statement. Around her, the table disappeared beneath piles of paperwork and open tabs. One by one, she began tracing every dollar she had sent to her family over the past 5 years. Rent transfers, emergency payments, birthday gifts, medical bill deposits. It all added up. Line by line, the truth emerged with brutal clarity. $87,000 gone, not including the little extras she'd long forgotten. And for what? A house in Bellevue she didn't live in, while she rationed heating in her apartment. Salon visits for Monica, spa trips for Lena, poker tournaments for Ryan, all paid for by her sacrifice. She pulled up Lena's social media, stunned by the cocktail selfies and weekend resort tags dated just days after desperate pleas for help. Monica's Facebook revealed a freshly dyed hairstyle from a luxury salon, posted the same week Harper sent money for critical tests. Ryan, supposedly buried in textbooks, appeared in photos poolside in Las Vegas, drink in hand. Harper snapped screenshots, cataloged timestamps, and saved PDFs. She wasn't just collecting receipts, she was building a case. Every post, every transaction was evidence that what she thought was support had been exploitation. Her fingers moved steadily, her face calm, almost clinical. This wasn't revenge. It was clarity. Harper wasn't preparing for a confrontation driven by rage. She was assembling the truth, and for someone trained to spot cracks in steel and tension in structures, the emotional blueprint of her family's manipulation was suddenly all too easy to read. Later that morning, Harper leaned back in her chair, the spreadsheet still open in front of her, but her eyes fixed on her phone. Her fingers hovered briefly before she began to type a message to Lena. "Hey, I think my phone glitched. Heard something weird last night? Everything okay?" It was simple, casual, and designed for one purpose: to test if Lena would lie. The response came almost instantly. "Oh good, just having dinner with Mom and Ryan. Must have been a weird signal thing. Talk later." No mention of the party, no explanation for the voices or laughter Harper had clearly heard. Just another effortless lie layered over years of deception. Harper stared at the message for a long time, her pulse steady. A part of her had hoped for honesty, even a clumsy excuse, but this only confirmed what the evidence already showed. Her family's betrayal wasn't an accident. It was routine. She deleted the message, then opened a blank page in her notebook and scribbled 3 words: "They always lie." This wasn't the moment to confront them. Not yet. She needed more clarity, more resolve, more preparation. Harper knew that when she finally cut them off, it wouldn't be with an emotional outburst. It would be quiet, methodical, and final, just like the bridges she designed. It would hold. For now, she would keep playing the role they expected: the helpful sister, the dependable daughter. She would keep the mask on a little longer, not to protect them, but to protect her plan. 2 days later, Harper stood in her small kitchen, mixing the batter for her signature dark chocolate cake, the one her family always devoured without comment, as if it simply appeared from the oven out of obligation. The scent of cocoa and vanilla filled her apartment as she packed it carefully into a worn, reusable cake carrier, her hands moving with practiced ease. She had accepted Monica's invitation to Sunday dinner with a warm, "Of course, wouldn't miss it," though every part of her now understood it wasn't a gathering of love, but a stage for their next performance. Harper had rehearsed her role. She chose her faded jeans and a sweater with a fraying sleeve, deliberately worn, projecting just enough financial strain to maintain the illusion they depended on. As she prepared, she checked her phone, ensuring her voice recording app was active and disguised, ready to capture whatever plea would come next. She wasn't going to fight, not yet. She was going to observe. Documents gather their next lie. When she finally arrived at the Bellevue house, her name still on the mortgage payments she'd been making for years, she paused at the curb, her fingers tightening around the steering wheel. The windows glowed warmly against the early dusk, a picture-perfect home that had cost her her financial stability and peace of mind. She practiced her smile in the rearview mirror. It didn't reach her eyes, but it would do. As she walked up the porch steps, Lena threw open the door, her polished nails flashing in the porch light, her tone syrupy with faux affection. "Harper, you made it!" Harper hugged her, cataloging every detail: designer perfume, a $400 purse disguised as a bargain find, and the practiced tilt of her head meant to convey stress. Behind Lena, Monica stood in the entryway, her eyes already scanning Harper's hands for what she was bringing: money, dessert, or both. "Just yourself," Monica had said on the phone, but they were expecting more, and Harper intended to give them exactly what they asked for, until it was time to give them nothing at all. Harper stepped into the warmly lit living room, her footsteps soft against the polished wood floors she'd helped pay for. The walls were adorned with framed photos: Lena's graduation, Ryan's football trophies, Monica's 60th birthday cruise. But Harper noticed, with quiet finality, that none featured her beyond her college graduation a decade ago. It was as if she'd been erased from the visual narrative, her presence valued only behind the scenes, like a silent investor in someone else's life. She handed over the cake and sat, the well-rehearsed script already unfolding around her. Coffee was poured, lemon squares offered, and soon Monica leaned in, her tone suddenly dipping into somber urgency. "We just heard from the landlord," she said, casting a glance at Lena and Ryan. "He's raising the rent again, by $250. Right on cue, Lena's eyes widened with just the right amount of practiced panic. "I've picked up extra research hours, but it's not enough," she added, ignoring the resort photos she had posted last Thursday. Ryan chimed in too, sighing heavily. If I take more delivery shifts, my GPA is going to tank. Harper nodded slowly, biting into a lemon square as her phone, propped discreetly on the coffee table, continued recording. She offered sympathetic noises, feigned concern, and even asked careful questions. Did you get that in writing? What kind of increase is that? They scrambled, fumbling slightly but recovering with ease. They'd clearly done this before. As the performance continued, Harper noted every exchanged glance between Monica and Lena. The unspoken coordination, the gentle steering of conversation toward guilt. But she remained calm, her smile polite, her tone even. Of course I'll help, she said smoothly. Their relief was immediate. Shoulders relaxed, smiles returned, and Monica even squeezed her hand. You're our angel, Harper. We don't know what we'd do without you. Harper nodded, her voice a soft echo of agreement, but inside something had shifted. For the first time, she wasn't emotionally tangled in their web. She was watching it, recording it. She'd studied fault lines in concrete, stress points in steel. Now she was tracing the cracks in her own family, and soon she planned to dismantle the entire structure they'd built on her back. Back in her apartment, the warmth of the dinner long gone, Harper sat alone, with the evidence laid out before her like a forensic reconstruction of betrayal. Her voice memo app had captured every manipulative word, every carefully rehearsed plea masked as desperation. She played it back once, not out of spite, but to confirm what she already knew. Her next steps couldn't be impulsive, they had to be precise. This wasn't just a personal reckoning, it was a structural takedown of a system that had drained her for years. She scheduled a quiet lunch with Tessa Lynn, her closest friend and a licensed therapist, who listened without interrupting as Harper laid everything bare. The recordings, the spreadsheet, the years of financial enablement she had disguised as love. That's not support, Harper, Tessa said gently. That's exploitation. The word felt foreign at first, sharp and clinical, but it landed with undeniable truth. Tessa's calm presence helped Harper process the grief, not just of what had been done, but of what she had allowed, out of loyalty, out of guilt, out of hope. There was no need for a screaming match or dramatic declaration. Harper would confront her family with facts, not fury. She began planning her delivery like she would a structural briefing. Evidence in hand, risks assessed, foundation exposed. This wouldn't be a scene, it would be a statement. And when the time came, they wouldn't be able to spin it, manipulate it, or guilt their way out of it. They would hear her. Perhaps for the first time in their lives. The next morning, Harper arrived at her bank with a neatly organized folder and a steel resolve. She sat across from a startled bank associate named Carla and calmly listed the changes she needed to make. New debit cards, new online credentials, withdrawal alerts, and added security questions on all her accounts. It wasn't paranoia, it was protection. A flagged alert from last December revealed Lena had tried to access Harper's savings account, something the bank hadn't reported but had quietly logged. The confirmation stung, but it also validated every step Harper was now taking. That afternoon, she continued her quiet purge. She removed her credit card from the family's shared Netflix and Hulu accounts. She deleted her payment methods from Amazon. She called the electric and water companies Monica claimed to struggle paying and confirmed she had never been listed on any of those accounts, despite years of covering their costs. She even ordered a new phone number and created a fresh email address, cutting the digital threads that once tied her to them. Each click, each change, was a dismantling of the invisible structure that had trapped her for so long. That evening, she lit a candle. Not for relaxation, but as a quiet ritual of reclamation. Her apartment, once filled with anxiety, sleepless nights, and endless spreadsheets, felt lighter. She looked around and noticed the quiet wasn't heavy anymore. It was peaceful. When Victor, her co-worker, dropped by to review project specs, he paused mid-conversation and said gently, "You look different." stronger. Harper smiled, not out of pride, but out of relief. She was beginning to rebuild, not just her finances, but her boundaries, her identity, her life. And for the first time, every dollar she kept felt like an act of healing. The afternoon sun cast long shadows on the manicured lawn of the Bellevue house as Harper pulled up to the curb and turned off the engine. The same house she had quietly paid for over 5 years. In the passenger seat beside her sat a manila folder thick with evidence: bank statements, voice recordings, social media screenshots, and a printed spreadsheet showing exactly how much she had given. $87,452. Harper took a deep breath, adjusted the collar of her coat, and stepped out of the car. Her hand didn't tremble when she unlocked the front door. Her key still worked, though she knew this would be the last time she used it. Inside, her family froze mid-conversation. Monica stood in the kitchen, her expression a blend of confusion and nervous anticipation. Lena glanced up from her phone, her face tightening. Ryan hovered by the dining table, arms crossed. "You're early," Monica said, trying to smile. "We weren't expecting you till—" Harper held up a hand, silencing her. "I'd like to play something for you." She set her phone on the coffee table and pressed play. The sound of clinking glasses and Lena's unmistakable voice filled the room. "Can you believe Harper still thinks she's helping us?" The color drained from Lena's face. Monica paled. Ryan cursed under his breath. One by one their voices echoed, mocking, cruel, calculating. Monica's laughter. Ryan's slurred taunt. "She's basically an ATM with a degree." When the recording ended, Harper pulled out the folder and laid the documents across the table. "The rent on this house is $1,200 a month," she said evenly. "You told me it was $1,450. That's $9,000 in fabricated overages." She tapped the spreadsheet. "And that's not counting the fake medical bills, the birthday emergencies, or the tuition lies." Monica opened her mouth to argue, but Harper continued. "I'm done. As of today, there will be no more financial support." "No more second jobs, no more guilt," Lena stammered. "We can pay you back, just give us time." "It's not about the money," Harper said. "It's about the truth." She reached into her pocket, took out the house key, and placed it gently on the table. "I suggest you use the 2 weeks on the eviction notice to find somewhere else to live." She looked at each of them, her voice steady, her shoulders squared. "You used me, and now the ATM is permanently out of service." Without another word, Harper turned and walked out, her footsteps deliberate, her freedom echoing behind her like a door finally shut. The days that followed were a strange mix of silence and chaos. Harper turned her phone back on the next morning to a flood of missed calls and messages. Lena's text started light. "Hey, rent's due today, everything okay?" But quickly escalated to panic. "We're being evicted. How could you do this to us?" Monica's voicemails were drenched in guilt, trying to twist the narrative. "After all we've done for you." Ryan's tone turned combative, accusing her of betrayal, but Harper didn't respond. She read each message calmly, her emotions surprisingly still. The storm they created no longer reached her. At work, she quietly thrived. Her focus sharpened, her energy no longer drained by midnight money transfers or emotional manipulation. When she met Victor at the coffee machine later that week, she finally told him everything. He listened, nodded slowly, then said, "Setting boundaries isn't cruel, Harper. It's how you stop bleeding." The words landed gently, anchoring her. That evening, she sat by her window with a warm cup of tea, her apartment filled not with noise, but with a deep, rare quiet, the kind of silence that wasn't empty, but healing. She didn't feel guilty, she didn't feel angry. What she felt was peace. The family she had tried so hard to save had never wanted saving, just access. And now, that access was revoked. For the first time in years, her silence wasn't the result of emotional exhaustion, it was a conscious, powerful choice. 1 year later, Harper's apartment looked nothing like the space it had once been. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, warming the cozy living room filled with vibrant plants, hand-picked art, and small luxuries she had once denied herself. The same dining table, where she'd once calculated survival, now held a charcuterie board, fresh tulips, and laughter from friends who expected nothing from her but presence. Tessa stood by the bookshelf, arranging wine glasses, while Victor recounted a courtroom story that had the entire room in stitches. Amira, her mentor from the engineering firm, offered a toast to Harper's recent promotion to senior project manager, a position she had quietly earned once she stopped carrying the weight of others. The woman who had once worked through weekends and sobbed over bank statements now spent her Tuesday evenings volunteering at a local STEM center, mentoring young women navigating the same burdens she once carried. On her refrigerator, beneath magnets from Tuscany and Maine, sat a sealed envelope with Monica's handwriting. Unopened? Harper had no interest in reading more pleas masked as apologies. She'd seen enough performances to know the difference between regret and manipulation. Occasionally, Lena's blocked emails surfaced, filled with vague promises of change, but the words felt hollow. Ryan had sent a message through a mutual friend claiming he missed her, but Harper no longer carried their weight. Her therapist's words had stuck. Boundaries aren't walls, they're filters. You decide what passes through. That filter had given Harper a life that was hers again. Not defined by guilt or duty, but by choice, by joy. Later that night, as her guests trickled out, Harper stepped onto her balcony with a journal in hand. The Seattle skyline shimmered beneath the stars. She opened to a new page and wrote, "Today marks 1 year of freedom. I choose to help, but not to be used. I choose to give, but not at the cost of myself." Behind her, the apartment glowed with warmth and honest connection. Ahead of her, the future stretched wide and unwritten. She closed the journal with a soft smile, knowing she had rebuilt more than a life. She had reclaimed her worth. As the evening breeze swept across her balcony, Harper leaned against the railing, her gaze steady on the twinkling Seattle skyline. The city pulsed with life, but for once, she didn't feel like she was chasing to keep up. Inside, her apartment was quiet, peaceful, not lonely. A year ago, that silence had been deafening, filled with confusion, grief, and guilt. Now, it felt like home. She glanced at the framed photo on her side table, her and her late father on the day she got her engineering license. "Still taking care of the family, Dad," she whispered, "just not the way they wanted." The photo smiled back, full of a pride she no longer needed permission to feel. She thought of Lena's empty apologies, Monica's silence, Ryan's bitterness, all of them clinging to a version of her that no longer existed. Harper had outgrown the role they cast her in. She no longer folded under guilt, no longer mistook obligation for love. Her life now was rooted in intention, friendships that nurtured her, work that fulfilled her, and generosity offered by choice, not manipulation. Her phone buzzed. A message from Elise, the young woman she was mentoring through the STEM Center. "Thank you for helping me set boundaries with my mom today. I didn't think I had the strength." Harper smiled, her reply instant and true. "You always had it. You just needed to see it." That was the legacy she chose to build, not as someone who was taken from, but as someone who taught others how to protect their worth. As she closed her eyes and took a deep breath, Harper understood something simple and powerful. Sometimes, the most radical act of self-love isn't escape. It's choosing who gets to stay. The story of Harper Jennings teaches a powerful lesson about self-worth, boundaries, and the courage to reclaim your life. For years, Harper gave everything, her time, money, and emotional energy, to a family that saw her not as a person, but as a resource. Blinded by guilt and love, she believed her sacrifices were helping, not realizing they were enabling manipulation. The accidental call shattered that illusion, forcing her to confront a painful truth. Unconditional giving without respect leads to silent suffering. Through reflection, documentation, and deliberate action, Harper learned that setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's necessary. Love without respect becomes exploitation, and silence only deepens the wound. By cutting ties, reclaiming her finances, and surrounding herself with genuine relationships, Harper didn't just escape a toxic dynamic, she built a life rooted in truth, choice, and mutual care. Her journey shows that healing begins the moment we stop justifying mistreatment in the name of family. Choosing yourself isn't betrayal, it's survival. And sometimes, walking away is the bravest form of love you can offer to yourself.